Hey everyone, thanks for listening today. I'm Christine Passo. I'm a support and transformation coach for midlife women, and I'm the host of Unconscious Evolution. Today, I warmly welcome Kim Roy. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Christine. It's so nice to be here.
Yay, I've been looking forward to this. So let's learn about Kim. Kim Roy is the founder of Pitch with Kim. She's a visibility and lead generation strategist helping heart centered, ambitious female entrepreneurs and authors use podcast guesting to build authority, expand their networks, and attract more opportunities with ease. Through personalized strategies and impactful pitches, she empowers her clients to confidently share their voice and story. I'd also like to slip in that she has co-authored a book, and her book releases in just a few days on January 25th. That's so exciting, Kim. I'm super excited for you. So, listeners, as usual, Kim's contact information and social media details are listed in the show notes. Please feel comfortable reaching out to her. She's awesome. Kim, thank you again for opening your personal life to us today. What would you like to share? And has anything new come up for you over the last several hours?
Oh my goodness. It's such a unique question. What has come up over the last several hours? I don't know that anything poignant really came up other than my own self-reflection and self-reflection on the year and clarity that came to me. So I think so often at this time of the year, well, of course, we're recording this at the end of December, just to give everybody some context here. At this time of the year, we reflect, on the year, how it went, and we start planning for the year ahead, our goals, our aspirations, and whatnot. And a lot of the times, I think we can fall victim to our own expectations, and we feel like we've fallen short of our goals. And so as I sat in reflection of this past year and the things that I would have loved to have pursued that maybe I didn't, I thought, well, wait a minute. I did a lot this year. I know it was a really, really good, strong year. So what have I done? And through that self-reflection, and this is timely because I was doing this within the last several hours, I thought, oh my goodness, yes, maybe I did not get to the XYZ goal,
Mhm.
but it was the process of becoming the woman that I needed to be able to fulfill that goal. And that's exactly what I did this year. I became that version of myself in my vision at the beginning of this year. And so the self-reflection there is just that aha of, we need to give ourselves more grace on the work that we do and own the wins and the celebrations along the way.
You know, you're so right in that. And I love that you talk about how you are recognizing your personal growth because, I was listening to a podcast a couple of years ago, and she's a business coach, and she's talking about looking at the year, right? Looking at the year that you just went through and preparing for the year ahead, that just as you mentioned. And she said, some of those years that maybe you didn't financially bring in what you hoped. She said, in some ways, maybe it's like devastating that you didn't bring in financially what you wanted. She said, but I can guarantee that that year you grew more on a personal level than you ever have. And that just really resonated with me because so often we attribute success to our role at work, right? Or the money that we brought in, just uh, um, to things that really don't do much overall to our lives and how we feel about ourselves because
Mhm.
those things can change at any time. But to grow personally is a lifetime, that journey, right? Is there anything that you want to share with us that has really kind of stuck out to you that you've grown with this year?
Yeah, yeah. What you're saying there is so true. It's all about the growth, right? And how we change as a person and really being able to accept ourselves where we're at and to fully step into that. And so what I've learned about my growth this year is, it's I think one of the biggest lessons I learned this year is the action. we all strive for, I'm just going to say, confidence, right? That could look different to all of us depending on where we're at. But whatever that thing is we're striving for, the confidence, the to have it all, that to feel like we are enough, to feel like we are worthy, to, whatever that is, and it comes in action. That confidence that we're always chasing, that validation, right? Like you said, where we, maybe it's the financial success, or it's we want to see a success with a launch, or we want to see success with a new job we're starting, or I don't know what, fill in the blank, whatever it is, right? Personal or professional. And we're always seeking that external validation. And it's like we think, well, when we're confident, we'll get there. But it's through the action that you get that confidence. And then you start realizing that you don't need anybody else's acceptance. You just need your own. And that is also such a crucial piece. This is the biggest lesson for me in my growth this year, is that confidence comes with action. And so, and the universe loves that. The universe plays with action, right? So so the saying is so real: when you take one step forward, the next step is revealed for you. You just have to learn how to trust yourself. And with that comes self-acceptance.
Oh my gosh. So, what you're saying is really kind of hitting a soft spot for me because last week I went to a networking event. I joined a local networking group where we're all wellness professionals, whether we are, yoga business owners or chakra. I mean, you name it, like anything that falls under wellness. And one of the women there, who's just really growing her business quite a bit, she said that somebody asked her to public speak. And she said, I've never ever considered myself a public speaker. But this person, approached her and said, hey, can you come and speak for 15 minutes about something having to do with wellness? Right. And she said, sure. And he said, I'll pay you $750. And so she's like, all right, well, I'll give it a shot. I mean, she's like, the worst that can happen is maybe I don't do that well. And, okay, so I've learned. And she just knocked it out of the park, right? She's
Mm.
just one of those natural, she just has that confidence in her. And she said when she finished that she knew at that moment, she said, okay, well, I am going to do a TEDx next year for
Mm.
2025. She's like, it's not a matter of I'm going to train for it and apply. I'm going to hope that I get it. No, she said, I'm going to do it. She said, there's no doubt in my mind that I'm going to do it because I'm already saying it. And she just kind of set something with a mindset and that belief that she already created action over, right? So going back to your word action, she created action in it and it hasn't happened, but it will
Mhm.
because that's that manifestation in movement,
Yes.
which is really, I don't think we live enough of our lives doing that because we're too busy thinking we're not enough, we don't deserve it, we don't know enough.
Yes, so spot on. I got chills when you were sharing that story, because the other side of this too is when you take that action, this twofold, right? When you take the action, like she said, sure, I'll give that opportunity a shot. Why not? I never considered myself a speaker, but why not? So she took action in that direction. It was a breadcrumb, we'll call it, right? That she followed, like a little sprinkle of something there. Oh, sure, tap my curiosity, let's go see. And then she discovered, oh, wow, I actually really enjoyed that. So had she not tried that opportunity, she would not have discovered that, right? And so that's also part of the action, and then she can take further action and manifest that decision for herself. So this is so beautiful because it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of my self-reflection. One of the things that I really, and I'll just call it up for what it is, but what I really wanted to accomplish this year for myself, I've hosted a podcast before. And this podcast was very much a passion project of mine long before I ever went into business for myself. And I ended up grandfathering it because when I started my business, I thought, you know what, I really want to launch a podcast for my business. And so I stood at the beginning of the year in front of a conference room full of women at a retreat. And I said, with conviction, 2024 is the year I'm launching my podcast for my business. And wouldn't you know that every action I started to take towards there just revealed other doors and opportunities that, you know, roots, I guess you can say, and soil and seeds that needed to be watered and tendered in order to bloom for me to get to the point where I'm ready to launch my podcast. And so there's so much that happens in action and so much manifestation that happens in that. Oh my goodness. I love this.
Okay, so here we go. This is where I start digging deeper. So those things that you talked about that needed nurturing and watering,
Yeah.
what were those things for you? What was
Yeah.
it that it was, I hate to use the word holding back because I don't think that was it because you were obviously taking steps. But what was it that you needed to care for to continue that journey?
Yeah, yeah. So, as newer in business, solopreneur, right? I'm coming up on 2 years, which I'm so proud of myself. I'm grateful for. But and I think many of your listeners who are business owners can relate because we all start somewhere at some point, right? Solopreneur, you're the bread and butter. You do it all. You do all of the things. You're the marketer, you're the salesperson, you're the client, the one working with the clients, or the one working on, your brand visibility, all of that. And so I realized that in order for me to create the space and the capacity to launch the podcast and for it to be successful, right? And to really do it the way I wanted to. And part of my journey also, I want to just kind of reiterate in here, has been recovering from being a perfectionist, right? That approval seeking, that validation seeking too. So all the while keeping this in the back of my mind of like, okay, every move is intentional, and it's a pause of, is this perfection, or is this, where, like, what's guiding the force here, right? But what I realized is I needed to create space and capacity. So to do that, I had to create systems on the back end and organizational structure for my clients and the onboarding process. And then I added teams. So I made my first hire, and there was some training with that. And then there was, some other support that I needed in other ways, some other investments that I did. And so one thing just kind of led to another, and it's all things that needed to happen and wouldn't have happened. I don't know that it would have happened on the same timeline if it wasn't through the conviction of, I'm launching my podcast, right?
Yeah.
So although that has not been brought to fruition yet, there's still 2025. And when I look back on what I did do this year, there's a lot that I did do. Like, I am in a better place now than I was at the beginning of the year. And I think that's the important thing to reflect on is, okay, sure, I could look at myself and say, great, I fell short on that goal, but what did I do? Right? And acknowledge all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's huge. That's huge. So
Yeah.
it makes me think about a call that I had with a friend. So before I launched my podcast, I was already talking about it and thinking about it. Just how, I mean, I just love deep conversations. I love digging in right away. I don't want to talk about the weather. I don't want to talk about the new shoes you got your kids. Cause I mean, we can talk about that anytime. It's like, how you feeling today? Right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you today? And so I knew it was what I wanted to do. And I was having a Zoom call with a business connection, a friend. And he said, wow, he's like, well, you better get all your ducks in a row. You're like, you need to do this. And, if it were me, I'd do this, this, and this. Where meanwhile, I was like, I already have a guest and I'm just going to shoot. Like, I didn't have a microphone. I just had my laptop. And, and what that brought up for me, and this is kind of what I'll be curious for you to dig a little deeper into, is for me, I was like, hell no, I'm not going to try and accomplish every single task on this list before I put out my podcast. I spent 40 plus years waiting for everything to be perfect and never thinking I had enough and never taking a step. So for me now, because personally, my personal development over, almost 54 years has been putting enough worth, recognizing my worth to say, even if I'm not fully ready, I'm doing it because this is important to me, right? And so that was I had a huge hurdle to climb over to get there, to get to this point, to even be doing this. I mean, 5 years ago, if you would have said you're going to have your own show team and you're going to be rocking it out as a support and transformation coach and you're going to be changing the face of grief for everybody. So for you, what do you feel? Because I know you said you spent some money on some other things. Like, did you work with a coach to kind of get over some hurdles? Like, tell us about that, because that's the meat and potatoes behind what creates success in everybody, but especially in women, because it's just
Mhm.
true. We just have kind of a lot more of those insecurities to conquer, just because we were brought up women. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And truly, in my heart of hearts, I believe that women see the most success when they deeply trust themselves. So what you just shared there is such a perfect example of that, of you were ready, you felt ready to your core. You were like, I'm doing this. I'm just doing this. And you know yourself better than anyone. So you knew that you needed to dive in. You knew that you had to hold yourself accountable to do it and do it. And you also knew that if you tried to lean on perfection and take the advice of, I'm sure an expert, right, who's experienced in that space and has a reason for what they were offering to you, but you leaned into your trust and you said, if I know that if I try to do all of these things, I won't actually get to where I need to go. So that's the trust. And so what did I do? Yes, I made some investments. I've been working with a sales coach. I also hired, in addition to hiring team for my business, I also hired tech support to come help me just kind of on the back end, the tech stuff that I'm not as savvy with, onboarding a new CRM system. These are all things that I needed to do to really help me scale, to create that space and that capacity. And I think that's all part of it too, is really trusting myself that I'm right on time. I'm right on time. Yes, maybe I haven't launched it yet, but I am exactly where I'm meant to be on my journey and I'm right on time. Why? How do I know that? Because every decision I've made along the way has been a very mindful and intentional decision, and it's been leaning on trust. Are they all going to go the way we want it to go? No, maybe probably not. I mean, that's not how life works. But when you trust yourself, that's where true growth happens and it reveals the next path. So even if it's not working out exactly how you envisioned it, right? Because, oh my gosh, we want to have control over everything. Learn to surrender, release that control, and lean into trust. And then that really just opens up so much opportunity. So, one of the things that I'm working on right now, too, and working with my sales coach, is I'm also launching a coaching program. And that's also part of my scaling, right? So that I can create more time and space and capacity for me to really have the impact that I want to have in my business. And same as you, Christine, very similar situation. The experts who are experts with launches and with programs and doing this, they've been doing it, coming in with, well, you need to do it this way, you need to do it this way, you need to do it this way. And then at one point, none of it was feeling great for me. And I found myself in resistance and I found myself feeling really stuck. And I thought, wait a minute, what is causing me to pause here? And I had to have a really solid look at myself. And it struck me of, because leaning into that, trying to get it just right and fitting the mold and doing it perfect was not sitting well with me. And I thought, you know what? No, I need to roll up my sleeves and just dive in and do it, and to do it my way. And if I fall flat on my face, I'm going to learn from it. But I also know myself well enough to know that in order for me to execute this is how I have to do it. And that is deep
Yeah.
trust, right? So just like you with your podcast. So I believe success comes in that, really leaning into that. And yeah, and that's a little bit more of what I did this year. I feel like there's a lot more than that. That's such a high level summary, but yeah.
Yeah. So you talk about trust a lot. So I'm gonna make a loose assumption here that that's been something that you've needed
Yeah.
in your life,
Mhm.
whether it was trusting other people, because we all know, and actually for those that don't know, that this could really, kind of awaken you to something, that the reason we don't trust others is because we don't trust ourselves.
Mhm.
That, we like to blame others more often than not. It's either because we don't trust our judgment, or we don't think we're good enough, or we don't think we're enough. And so that trust, that we like to blame on everybody else. How can you speak to that for your life, your personal life? And I have a feeling that, you might have maybe a sensitive story to talk about, but that's what we're here for on this show. We're here to talk about those tender spots, because this is how we learn. And for you to potentially validate another listener, at least one, is life changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. It's been so much a part of my story, that trust. And I didn't know. I didn't know that it would be. I did not know that. That wasn't clear to me, when I first started diving into self-development and growth and healing. And really what prompted that was a phone call that I received 6 years ago, quite unexpected, that completely changed the trajectory of my life. And that was the phone call I received on New Year's morning, 6 years this year, that my father passed away very unexpectedly. I was 6 months pregnant with my daughter at the time, and that really changed my life. I did not know it in that moment, but boy, did it change my life. And I grew up an only child. I'm an only child, big family, but I'm the one. And I grew up in a very loving family, but a family who really strived for that validation that we were talking about, right? That external need to make it look like we have our poop in a group, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? That we have it all put together. And so there's always very much an element of perfection. And so that's what I learned to strive for my entire life. I learned to place my worth on that. And, that to be loved and to be accepted meant that I had to be good, and to be good meant that I had to be perfect. And so it was this constant, right? So growing up, going to school, striving for the straight A's, and that's all. It wasn't about, I spoke a little bit about my this year, my reflection on how my story of becoming the person that I need to be, becoming the woman, right? And that's also part of my growth, because you know before my father passed away, I was a completely different person. But growing up and striving for those good grades in school, and even when I went to university, and then also playing sports, it was always trying to be the best. I never actually enjoyed the journey, right? So now I look back, it's like, life passed me by, life flew by, and I spent the entire time sitting in a textbook just trying to ace that test, not actually learning, right? Because it was
Mhm.
always trying to be good, to do the good thing, and trying to, so once that was off the checklist, check, next to, on to the next thing. That's been very, very, very much a part of my life journey. And after losing my father, that really threw me into survival mode. I really was anchored into an identity of anger, is what I call it. I use that as an armor to protect me, and just to keep going, to stay strong. And when that nearly damaged my marriage, about 2 years of that was the wake up call that I needed. And I thought, okay, yeah, this is, I cannot go on like this. Had really hit rock bottom, and I'm like, I absolutely cannot go on like this, and I cannot fight alone anymore. And that opened up my eyes to personal development, to self development. So I was definitely very naive to that world before. I was very into physical fitness, my physical health. Mental health was like, I didn't even know that's how naive I was. So really, my father's passing opened a door for me that I was so naive to before. And so now, coming into myself and growing and healing, and just, becoming the woman that I desire to be, it is very much a becoming journey. And I think that's so important too, is that through, the trials and the tribulations and the challenges and the joys and all of the things that we experience every single day and every single year, it's to find the gratitude and the beauty in all of it, and know that it's all happening for us to learn and to grow from, and enjoy the ride. Just enjoy the ride. And that has been my motto the last couple of months, specifically: enjoy the ride the wave, just go with the flow. You're being guided. And as long as you have that, then there is trust.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that the grief that you experience, actually I can't speak for the grief that you experience, but there's something that happens to us
Hmm.
when there's that kind of trauma, that shock and trauma
Mhm.
wrapped around end of life. And I really do believe that probably for 2 years, maybe even more, but especially the first 2 years, you are just kind of operating a bit on autopilot. Like, you think you're, fully present, but because the grief is right there, it can be difficult to do. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to touch on something that you talked about, where you said, essentially you were striving for perfectionism, right? So
Mhm.
before you learned, and that because of that, you weren't recognizing mental health, because being perfect and mental health, they don't match. There is no relationship, because without being perfect, what's the point of anything? It's either you're hitting that point. In fact, one of my clients right now, one of the things we're working on is giving something a try, even if it doesn't have a true purpose. It's like, go try that book club. Who cares? If you don't like it, then just stop. Where for her, it's, well, but it needs to have there needs to be a goal involved, right? Because it has to be perfect. It has to win. And if not, what's the
Mhm.
point? And so I think we confuse that a lot with perfectionism. We don't realize the many, many things that we're doing in that decision that damage us and the opportunities in our lives. Um, Kind of just, shuffling back a little where I talked about the first 2 years of being in that grief.
Yeah.
How, because, I talk about grief. I talk about grief due to, I mean, pet loss and, other things like job loss, relationship change,
Yeah.
all the things moving. So for you and the grief that you experienced it, if you were to kind of explain what that was like for you the first year, the first 2 years, because I
Mm.
think so many people don't really understand, which
Yeah.
I get that, but sometimes we just need to know what other people actually go through to then be able to support other people. So if you don't, if you're comfortable sharing, um, it will help me, to be perfectly honest,
Yeah.
and it will help a lot of my listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And grief is that thing, like you even said it just best, Christine, just now, how it's grief of all the things. It's not just, we think of grief, we associate grief with the loss more often it is, right? But we associate with the loss of someone, like a human or a very beloved pet. And that's the thing with grief, is that essentially grief, yes, it's loss, it's a form of loss, it can also be a form of change, and grief comes in so many different ways. And I think we are just so what's the word I'm looking for? We're just so kind of prime. We live it all the time, right? Like a change in season, there could be grief there. Change in just seeing our kids grow. We love watching them grow and into young little, from infancy to kid to toddlers to kid. We love watching that journey, but there can be grief there too, because you see the years go by, right? There can be grief in little things. Mondays, the Monday blues. That's grief, right? I mean, you're grieving the weekend. It's
Yeah.
behind you now, right? Anything. You get sentimental of song that comes on, it takes you back to a memory. You might have a little bit of grief over that memory because you miss it, right? So it comes in so many different shapes and sizes, and we're just so accustomed to it in a way because like we live it all the time, that we are disassociated with how it actually feels in our body. So when we do experience a big grief like death, right, of someone we love or a beloved pet, if we do not pause long enough to allow yourself to feel that grief in your body and process it, it will take shape another way. And for me, it took shape as anger, because I did not, I was 6 months pregnant when my dad died. I'm an only child. My father was self-employed, so it was also mothering my mother in a way, right? Really helping her as a widow get back on her feet. So I was her rock. And then I was welcomed my baby girl into the world. My breastfeeding journey was also very challenging. I was working corporate at the time. I was going through a company transition right in the midst of that. So there was a question mark about insurance. There was all the things, right? Just all the things um, that at the time, now I see them differently, right? Because I can see things differently now from my growth and evolution. But at the time it was like, why is the world working against me? And I was really caught. I was a victim of my own circumstances, and all I knew how to do was stay strong, keep muscling through, keep going. And then everybody talk about the validation seeking, right? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're so strong, look at you, wow, how are you doing it all? And I'm like, oh, going great, just so great. And inside dying, right?
Yeah.
Dying, but not willing to admit that, because there's an element of shame there too. And so when I say the wake up call that I got, 2 years later, it was from another ridiculously petty fight that I picked with my husband. I mentioned I was my mother's rock. Well, he was my rock. And it wasn't like I was intentionally trying to cause him harm or pain. And there was nothing physical by this. This is all me being very sad and anger. So a lot of verbal, emotional projection of, just hating life, truly, And when you're home and you're behind closed doors and you have nowhere else but that energy to go because, hey, I wasn't processing or feeling the grief, it had to go somewhere, right? Up and out. And so that wake up call with him, that moment of like, oh my goodness, I might actually lose my marriage here, was the wake up call I needed. And when I finally took a stand for myself at that point to say, okay, whoa, time out, pause. The reality I've been living in for the last 2 years is not normal. It's not healthy. I shouldn't have to do this alone. I don't have to do this alone. When I started seeking help, the lifeline that I saw at that point was therapy. It was like the first thing that I was like, let me just grab something, right? But that I at that point it's like when you need to tap into whatever it is that is going to help you, right? Nobody is beneath therapy, nobody is beneath coaching. We're not meant to go through this alone, because truly what therapy taught me through that is it taught me what grief is. It taught me that, oh, underneath that anger is sadness, and it's the grief that I haven't allowed myself to process or to feel. Oh, and you know what else was underneath that anger? Joy that I had also suppressed because I felt shameful for feeling any kind of joy after losing my father, right? And so that's the thing for me that I learned is, when you stuff it down, you don't allow yourself to feel it, it will come up masked as something else. And for me, it was anger. Fill in the blank. It could look differently for other people. And I think that's the other important thing too, is always look at, like, anger is a secondary emotion. So it could often be coined as negative, right? But it's an emotion, just like any other emotion. And emotions are not negative or positive. They're neutral. And so giving yourself grace, but knowing that you need to truly allow yourself to feel that. And so how do you do that, right? How do you actually feel that? And that's very much a practice, and that's why I say nobody has to go through this alone. But now I can see grief and I can feel it for what it is. I mean, I was just talking about the Monday blues, and today we're recording this on a Tuesday, Christine. Yesterday, I felt it. And
Yeah.
I feel it more strongly this time of the year because it's the holiday season and I lost my father on New Year's Day. And so when I felt it yesterday, there was a moment of, oh my gosh, what is this? Why am I feeling it? Because nobody wants to feel this way, right? And then but before you actually go down the rabbit hole of, beating yourself up over it, pause. What do I need right now? And then it hit me like, oh, this is grief. I see you. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
beautifully said. And and I like how you brought up that yesterday was hard because it's the holiday season. And of course,
Yeah.
your father passed away New Year's Day. And see, this is the thing also that we don't realize about grief is because it lives in our body will react many times before our mind even understands.
Mhm.
And so that's why so many people this time of year feel lonely, aren't feeling the joy, because even if they lost somebody, let's say in the summer, 5 years before, well, they're still not here, right? I mean, whatever it is, it always comes up this time of year because we are pushed to feel joy no matter what. I mean, there have been conversations that I have had that people are like, "Yeah, but it's the holidays, you should be happy." I'm like, "First of all, I don't use the word should. I
Amen.
don't like it. It is accusatory, right? And it always makes an assumption of something negative. And why should I? Why? Because this is the path that person is down, likely because they are avoiding their own grief.
Mhm.
It's this, let's put on a happy face. But, our bodies know, our physical bodies know, and our physical bodies will respond in exhaustion, right? We won't know. We'll be like, I don't know why I'm so tired. Well,
Yeah.
because emotionally, you're exhausted.
Mhm.
And so much of what you talked about leads in that direction, that you love what you do. I know you love what you do. We've had so many conversations. You're very happy in your life. You have a great physical activity routine. I mean, I think you're just doing amazing. But yet you had a rough day. And you know what? Some people would be like, wow, why is she having such a rough day? Like, her dad died 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago. I mean, she's got a family that she should be grateful for, right?
Mm.
And then there's this pressure. It's like, well, why aren't you grateful for your family? Well, because this is grief, everybody. Unfortunately, hi, doggy. It's okay. No worries. I love to listen. Look, Dogs. For listeners, for those of you listening on Apple or Spotify or anywhere, I got all my dogs behind me, and Kim's dog is saying hello. So there's nothing wrong with that.
I even have the blinds shut so she wouldn't do this, but hey, it's life,
Hey,
right?
it is. It is. And actually maybe a good turning point. Grief, it is, it's heavy. It's a lot to talk about. And that's
Yeah.
why a lot of people don't like to talk about it. But I'm so grateful that you did, because it is life. We, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's hidden in all of our everyday things, everything. And by dismissing it, we're really, doing ourselves a disservice to feel pure joy and to feel absolute peace. So, really quickly, when we first began our conversation, I talked about your book.
Hmm.
And part of a little bit about what we talked about today is in the chapter of the book that you co authored.
Mhm.
Is there anything, like a little teaser, that you'd like to maybe share with our listeners so they have an idea? Because as a co-authored book, there are a bunch of different authors that tell their own stories, but you've shared some really important and beautiful things with us today. What might our readers or your readers, get to know you better with your book?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for allowing me and the opportunity to share, Christine. That's it's very, very nice of you. So this book, it is a memoir anthology. So I'm a co-author with about 20 or 22 other women, and we are all coming together to share our own story of our pilgrimage of motherhood. And so I very much share my story about my father's passing, and the time in my life of when that happened. And I speak about my journey, my pilgrimage of motherhood, and how, really how I mentioned that call was the turning point when I received the news of his passing was a turning point in my life, and how my journey has really unfolded so much opportunity for me personally, professionally. I had a huge shift in my own career and profession, and then also how it's shaping me as a mother. And I think that that's the most beautiful part of this story is that my journey of becoming is allowing me to step into the woman that I desire to be, not only who I want to be as a leader in this world, but as a leader of myself, my life as a wife, how I show up in my relationships as a mother, and truly leaving behind a legacy that I am so proud of leaving behind for my daughter, and really leading by example and breaking generational patterns and showing her that women can pave their own path. They do not need to seek that validation. They don't need to lean on anyone else, or anyone else's approval, really, for that matter. And so that's really, I walk you through my journey and the evolution that I went through. And my chapter is called Grieve with Gratitude, and for a reason, because truly, and I will leave you with this. And if you want to read more about why this is, please get the book. It's an amazing culmination of a lot of stories in there that will really inspire you, truly. But what I will leave you with is Grieve with Gratitude, my chapter. My father's passing truly marked my rebirth. And that's what my story is about.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And tell us again, just so we don't confuse it, the name of the book.
The name of the book is Deserts to Mountaintops. It's the third volume, The Pilgrimage of Motherhood, and it is coming out on January 25th, and it's going to be available on Amazon.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I just have to buckle back. We talked about generational change, right? Or
Yeah.
generational patterns. Oh boy. I mean, I've been a generational pattern breaker. I might be one of the only people in my family doing this, and so a lot of times I'm not really greeted with a lot of acceptance over it,
Mm.
because I'm going against what they know to be their own status quo, but I'm questioning it. And I have some ideas in my mind for how I want to continue questioning my generational upbringing. And again, it's so important for me to always say this, that it's to no fault of anybody. We practice what we are taught.
Yeah.
And until we just hit a point that maybe we're so incredibly miserable that we have to make a change, otherwise we just continue forward with it. And we think it's
Mm.
potentially the right way. In a lot of cases, it's not. So for you, in recognizing the personal development that you have made this year, do you have any thoughts in mind for any additional generational shifts you're hoping for next year?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question,
I know, I'm
Christine.
digging deep, I'm digging
I
deep.
was not expecting that one. I'll need to think about that for a minute here.
Mhm.
You know, my my journey in the breaking the generational patterns is very much through my growth, right? And
Mhm.
as someone who practices it like you do, Christine, I know you can appreciate this, that the approach we take and the efforts that we put in is only as far as the inner work that we're doing. And so for me, it's also holding myself accountable to my own work so that I can show up for her and show her how to do the work herself. So, what I mean by that, emotional regulation, creating safety around uncomfortable things that are new to us, honoring our feelings and our emotions, creating a safe space to feel our feelings and emotions and not feel shameful around it, right? Talking about our feelings and our emotions, really shifting the way um, we look at, I'm going to say we, the way I look at my
There
daughter's
we
behavior,
go, that's what I'm looking
right?
for.
Yes. The way I look at my daughter's behavior, right? Because the one thing that I learned too is behavior is a form of communication, even in adults. I mean, it really is. And children, they're still developing. They're still developing. And here's the big thing is that as children, they are forming their belief system at that point in time. So they're just a walking subconscious. They're just taking it all in and everything is stored in their body. So you alluded to the grief earlier, Christine, of how that's stored in our body. Yes. And we have a lot of different things stored in our body from when we were children. And so yeah, so part of breaking the generational patterns is breaking my own adaptive behaviors that I've formed along the ways, and then also making sure that I'm leading by example in all that I'm trying to sway. So what am I looking to really accomplish in 2025 is more growth in myself, because I don't think that someone should ever stop, really. I mean, that's like my purpose, really. My purpose is, self-development, truly. But it's also to continue to form that bond, that trust, and that connection with my daughter. So the more I can hold space for her own discomfort, the more trust is built there. And that is a relationship that I'm looking to blossom rather than have it be this constant power struggle. It's a collaborative, supportive environment.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. And you know what? I should have you back on in about 8 months. Let's see, that would get us into, September, right? 8 months from now? Okay. And see how you're doing with that, because more
Mm,
often than not, and this won't mean that you haven't achieved this, but what ends up happening is life comes into play, right? And it pushes us towards a lesson that we didn't realize we were
mhm.
supposed to be learning from. And so, because I did ask you this question, I haven't asked anybody else this question on the show yet. So, I would love to bring you back on and do a quick clip of that, what you just said, and then ask you what's going on. Like, here we are, we're September of 2025. What generational pull in that change that you originally wanted? How does that look now? I think that would be awesome. Would you come back for that?
I would absolutely come back. I would
Oh,
absolutely come back for that. I think it's so important too. And so important to talk about it, because I think there's well, you even said it, right? It hasn't really been quite welcomed in your own practice of it. I think there's just such a stigma around it. So the more we can talk about it, yeah, I think that's so
yeah.
important. I would absolutely come back.
Yay. Okay, listeners, guess what? Kim's coming back. Well, Kim, thank you so much for sharing your story today. Thank you to the listeners for tuning in. If you'd like to contact Kim, which I recommend, and I also recommend you check out her book, in 3 days it's releasing. All of her information is in the show notes. Kim, thank you again. Please say goodbye, and then I'm going to close this up.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Christine, for the opportunity. And, I just can't echo Christine enough. So please, please check out the book, Deserts to Mountaintops, coming out in 3 days, available on Amazon. It's a beautiful culmination of a lot of very courageous and vulnerable stories that will be very inspirational for you. And if you're looking to connect, I'm most active on Instagram. So please come find me at Pitch with Kim.
Yes, her Instagram account is great. Do it. Do it. I follow her. I love it. I think I don't know. I'm pretty devoted to you, Kim, so that's what I know. But listeners, until next time, enjoy yourself, enjoy the moment, and try to discover what your unconscious evolution is.